Hello, and welcome to Madmen's Knowledge, a podcast where we answer questions no one is asking and argue about things no one cares about in order to grant you insight. Insight as to what? We don't know, but here we are. We're your hosts, the Madmen in question, Hayne and Griffin, and today our topic of discussion is alternative energy. We have 9 different forms of alternative energy we're going to talk about, some of the pros and cons, and we're going to pick out which one we think works the best. So that's sort of the format here.
Also,
First
just
upon.
whichever one we like the most.
Mhm. All right, so first on the list, we've got wind energy, and this one is probably pretty familiar to everybody.
I gotta
It's
tell
just a
you,
big.
I'm a
Mm.
big fan.
All right, and that's all the time we have for today. Uh, wind energy is just it's the electricity produced by the big turbines that you just place out in a field, and the wind spins it around, generates electricity. It's pretty cool. The pros of it are mostly that one, it's a pretty low impact and it's pretty low like footprint energy source. You just have to build up these wind farms, and you need the land to like host them, and you need to. It's a little bit setting specific. It only really works like on the plains or on coasts where there's a lot of wind constantly. Mountain ranges is also pretty good. So it's not necessarily a universal thing. If you go into a heavily wooded area, there's not going to be a whole lot of wind, but it is pretty effective. And from the article we have, it claims that there's pretty low impact on sort of the animal populations as well. Um, but
Yeah, because you,
overall,
you figure all you need for it is the large fan in question, and then also, you probably need a transformer at the bottom or some routing to get the power somewhere.
hmm and I will say, like the biggest impact is really just like if a bird flies into the fan, like that's a bad day for that bird.
Also,
Um,
probably a bad day for the fan, but
yeah. Well, if it's a small bird, I feel like it's not gonna do too much to the fan.
mm.
Anyway, but
Wind energy is also
the
super dependable. It's
yeah,
just always going to be wind, so it's not like the highest power output. But it really
yeah.
doesn't require much.
hmm
Like with some of these other things, you have to either create plants or be in a specific area and have a situation that is advantageous to you. With wind energy, you can go pretty much anywhere where there's higher winds and you just throw the fan down and you're all good.
hmm The question, I think that if, like, hypothetically, if we were to switch to purely wind, I think the question then becomes how do you transport energy from the high wind areas to the low wind areas? But that's really a thing you have to worry about for all of these. Um,
Mm.
and there's a couple of options there. We can discuss that at the end, though, I think.
Yeah, that'll be applicable for all of them.
Okay.
Let's
Next
move
up
on
on
to
the
our
list.
second one, which is solar energy. We're all familiar with solar energy. Um, Honestly, solar energy has been moving leaps and bounds recently. To the point where like the solar panels, like if you can put up some solar panels, they will pay for their cost, um, in electricity, like really, really quickly. They're just super efficient. Again, there's always going to be sun. Um, if you live in a high sun area, like you're going to be rolling in energy. You could honestly, there's a bunch of really cool websites that you can go on, like a Google Maps type software, and it will show you like where on your house are viable locations for solar panels. Like you can see, like it'll highlight different sections of your roof. Uh, so I mean, solar's pretty much. I think that's probably one of the ones that we've been focused on, uh, improving and considering as an alternative source, uh, just because it's so dependable. The sun's always going to be there. Solar energy. If the sun's not there, we're not there.
If
And
the
you,
sun's not there, we have bigger
yeah,
problems.
exactly, exactly. And just making it making a lot of energy for something that you only have to pay for once. Again, same thing with wind energy. You just plunk it down and it starts making electricity for you.
Yeah. And I mean, there is maintenance cost, obviously. But I would say those are pretty low. I don't imagine that they'd be any higher. I will also give the warning here that neither of us are professionals or experts on this. We're kind of just going off of our general knowledge. Um, so do not take this as fact. Do your own research.
Yeah. Something else that's really cool that I had seen is that they had mobile solar panels where they had
Hmm.
like a roll of solar cells wrapped up in the back of a truck, and they could
Hmm.
drive it to high sun areas and then roll them out and then roll them back up and then move to the next. And so they just basically had a mobile solar energy field.
Interesting.
So that's also something to consider, is that unlike with wind, you can move the solar panels to wherever the sun is.
I will say one big downside to solar energy is it takes up a lot of space. Like you need a lot of land to make a good solar farm, and that land is obviously going to come from somewhere. So there's going to be some impact in terms of either you have to, like if you're in a city or an urban area, you have to level a bunch of buildings to make room for the solar farm. Or if you're in like a more rural or wooded area, like you'll have to clear out whatever plant life or woods there are to plant those in. But like in places where you just have big empty open fields, it's not a huge burden. Solar energy, the other thing about it is the sun has a lot of energy and it throws a lot of it at us. And we only I don't even know what the uh rule is called, but it's like only 10% of energy transfers between uh like levels on the energy pyramid, and that's but like plants only get like 0.1% or something. So if we can increase the efficiency of solar power, then you're going to get like even by 0.0001%, like that's such a massive increase in what we're getting out of the sun.
Yeah, just because it's such a massive source of energy. And also, you spread that 0.001% over all of the energy that you're receiving from the sun multiplied by however many solar cells on however many solar panels you have.
Hmm. I think that one thing, I don't know if this is like a thing that's been done or even possible, but like I think that solar energy could be very viable in like a urban environment if you were to incorporate them into buildings. Because like I'm thinking of New York, like there's a lot of really tall buildings, and if you were to put like solar panel or like the solar energy technology like in your glass panes, or just like line the building with them, like it's going to get hit by all that sun, and it's going to definitely reduce the amount of power that you need. Maybe not fully like power the building, but definitely going to make a huge impact there.
Yeah, and there's a lot to be said about not even, you know, not going fully solar, but just even supplementing the energy that you're using with two or three solar panels on your house. Like that's absolutely a viable thing. And that's honestly what solar energy is really good for, is if you throw down two panels, you're not doing the maintenance and you're not doing the land clearing that you need for like a full solar farm, but you're still getting a decent chunk of energy and, just decreasing your footprint to like infinitesimally small.
Anything else we have to say on solar? Or are we gonna move on?
I think that's about all there is to
Okay.
solar.
So next is hydroelectric energy. And this is essentially anywhere that there's a dam for a river. The water passes through the dam and turns a turbine and generates electricity. Um, a very reliable source of energy as well, because those rivers are pretty much always flowing. Certain areas it might be a little bit less. Certain areas it might be a little bit less consistent, just because seasonal flow is varied by the weather and like how much precipitation you get. Um, but it's a pretty good option in terms of generating electricity. One big problem with hydroelectric power, though, is that when you build these dams, it significantly changes the landscape and the ecosystem before and after the dam. Because before the dam, you've got, before the dam is built at all, you have this one river that's flowing pretty consistently all the way down. Once you build that dam, you're now making a bottleneck point, and no matter how much or how little water, like whatever the flow rate through the dam is, unless it's a like instantly passing through the same rate as it was before, you're going to create a little bit of a bottleneck. And so the area before the dam is going to rise in water levels, which is going to change where the shores are going to be. And the area after it, it's going to have a fall in water level. Um, and that's going to lower where the water is and also change the landscape. So that's just an environmental impact you have to consider when you're using hydroelectric energy.
Yeah, this is obviously again very very dependable because the river flows. Unless you've got huge drought activity, this is going to be very effective. This one is where you get into. This is really a lot of very dependable energy. Probably more so than wind, but it is more impact all around. It's more effort from you. You have to not only find the proper place to set up a hydroelectric dam, but you have to go to the effort of damming a river. And also, just maintenance on it is going to be more finicky than wind energy. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of the cost you pay for the higher energy output that you're getting.
hmm And also, this is limited by the fact that you need a river for it. So, uh, any place that is a desert essentially, yeah, you're kind of boned there. Great Plains, not really gonna happen. Arizona, probably not. Maybe one or two. I think there is actually a couple of like dams, but like not everywhere.
Yeah. So
Anyway,
speaking of regional limitations, our next energy here is the most limited regional energy, and that is geothermal. Geothermal energy is when you are tapping into the heat from the earth, hence geothermal, and you're using that to generate power for you. This is really easiest around vents, so that it's easy to get to that heat, and those are obviously understandably limited. So geothermal energy, you've got a lot of it in uh, I think Scandinavia's got a bunch of it just because they have very many thermal vents, and even some geysers have been utilized for geothermal energy. Honestly, I don't really know how to feel about geothermal energy. It seems all right, but just based on how limited it is, like it's a very cool concept.
it's
Uh,
a cool concept, and it's a pretty. The thing is that geothermal is pretty much just taking the energy that's already released by the Earth and just using that, which I think is good and cool and kind of the idea of these alternative energies and renewable energies. But the thing is that like I don't know enough about the like how you'd actually go about building them because I also think that a lot of these thermal vents are built like underwater or like at the bottom of the ocean, and that poses its own sorts of problems in terms of maintenance and actually getting down there. Um, and you also have to consider that like a lot of the underwater vents as well have a pretty significant ecosystem living down there. So I mean, you'd have to displace them entirely, and there's not really another place that those things can go unless you like had them live on your geothermal plant, but that might cause problems of its own.
yeah, geothermal plants are also very expensive. They're
hmm
quite, obviously it is a very clean and low impact energy because you're just using what is readily available. Um, and that's part of what makes it sort of unique, and it makes a lot of sense for some locations, and for other locations it doesn't matter at all.
Hmm.
But the geothermal plants are quite a bit to behold. There's just a lot of piping goes into them, and the steam is really what you're after. So it is basically like a steam turbine combined with all of the necessary piping to get steam from the geothermal vents to that turbine. So it is a little bit invasive. Obviously, as you said, you got to disturb the environment a little bit. You got to get pipes in there, but it is, you're not you're not destroying anything. Hydroelectric, you're pretty much dooming that river. Um,
Yeah.
the ecosystem's going to change. Geothermal energy, nothing's going to be able to live right next to it anymore, but it is, you're not destroying it. You could basically just pick up and decide that you're not going to do it anymore, and it would go right back to normal.
So, the next one on the list, unless you have anything else to say.
Nope.
Before we continue, I'm just going to say we should have talked to my mom about this. I feel like she would know quite a bit.
Probably.
Yeah. Oh well.
Eh.
Anyway, bioenergy is the next alternative form. And essentially, this is taking biomass and just burning it. So instead of using coal and oil that we have right now, we're using like more renewable fuels essentially. So like ethanol, which is made from corn, or in the article it mentions like taking the gas that's released from like landfills as things decompose, and taking that gas and using it in a plant rather than going and digging it up. Um, which I think is interesting. My biggest concern with bioenergy is that the fact of the matter is that America produces a whole lot of food already, and most of it goes to waste at the moment. But so like let's say if we used corn specifically, like we used ethanol fuel primarily, um, like how, first of all, I don't know what like what would be released by burning ethanol like that, but also like if we were to feed like if food were to not be thrown away and like distributed so that nobody was hungry at that point, which is a whole separate other thing we're not going to mention. How much of the corn do we produce would like be used for ethanol? Like how much would we have to expand our already existing cornfields and agricultural like footprint? Um, because also
Yes. Corn
corn,
economics.
yeah. And the other thing is that like corn isn't just used for us. Corn is also used primarily in feed for like all sorts of uh
Livestock.
animals. Yeah, livestock. I don't know how much gas is released from landfills and such. But I would say that if we could just like take some of the, if we could just take the gas that's already coming out of there and utilize that instead of just letting it fly out into the atmosphere, I feel like that would be a pretty good option, but I don't think that's where we should focus our energy.
I have to agree. It's sort of, bioenergy feels like a very like short term, like direct replacement. Like, oh my god, we've run out of coal. What do we use instead? And
Yeah,
not really something that you could. It's nice because we already have, you already have the facilities. You could just replace the fuel, but at the same time, that makes it feel really impermanent and just sort of hurried. Uh, and I don't know. It would just be a worse version of coal. Um,
I think realistically, though, it is the most reasonable to like get passed essentially in the like in America, if we were gonna try and like make legislation to like switch fuels, I think bioenergy has the greatest potential to actually get passed, if that makes sense.
I agree. I think that's almost what it's best in, is that it is so reasonable and easy, and it's just like, hey, we need to cut our carbon emissions right now. Let's stop burning coal and replace it with the ethanol from the corn. Uh, the problem with that is sort of it runs out after time, where, you can, if you could convince there to be political action about this and just get bioenergy like started and just switch completely to bioenergy, I think within a few years you'd have people who were just sort of angry that it's not as uh, efficient as burning coal. Um,
Yeah.
which is why I think that, one of these other energies, they have the potential to produce, if universally implemented, it would be a little bit harder to implement them universally, but if it does happen, they have the potential to produce equal or even more energy than what we're currently doing.
Yeah. And I think the other thing to consider is that if we were to switch to bioenergy, and I'm mainly focusing on ethanol because that's the only one I can think of at the moment. Um, but like that would be placing a lot more strain and like reliance on agriculture, which means that like if we had a drought, not only is our food like stores going to suffer, but also our fuel. And so I feel like that might be putting too many eggs in one basket type deal.
Definitely something to consider there.
That's all that. The next one,
The next one is nuclear energy. Um, nuclear energy has been, a pretty hot topic recently. Um,
France is switching back to using nuclear power plants.
it's the I find that there's not really a lot to be afraid of with nuclear energy. I think that people are frightened by the word nuclear.
Yes, I think the Cold War had a big part to deal with that.
Yeah, and obviously, well, yes. Obviously, it is more dangerous at face value. You're splitting atoms here. And if we can ever figure out how to harness fusion, that would be a bit crazy. But if we could ever figure out how to harness that again, like these are massive amounts of energy that are spiking and being put out. And it's frightening because it's nuclear and you're sort of messing with things that the common person doesn't understand. Solar energy, you put out a thing that the sun shines on. Um, wind energy, it's a giant turbine. Like everybody can see how that works and understand. With nuclear energy, explaining exactly how and why we are able to get at the energy that we can, glean from these atoms is it's difficult. And so I think there's a lot of undue stress and hassle around nuclear energy that when you compare it, I mean, like, yes, you're splitting an atom and it's dangerous and it's for the common person it is uncharted territory, but there's been so much research that has gone into that. There's so many safety measures. uh, the only thing you really have to worry about is freak accidents, and even if
Like
freak
Chernobyl.
accidents, yes, well, Chernobyl was like 30 freak accidents at once,
Yeah.
combined with maybe some negligence.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, if all you have to worry about is freak accidents, like that's a risk I'm willing to take because when it comes down to it, burning fossil fuels is worse. It's a certainty of the slow and awful just decline of our planet. And if something doesn't change, like it is world destroying power on a greater scale than a nuclear uh, power plant accident.
Yeah. Well, so I actually wrote a paper on this last semester. Nuclear energy isn't green and it's not renewable because we have to use a very specific type of uranium to power nuclear reactors, and there is a limited amount of that. And then also you have to consider that there is a lot of environmental damage that's done by the mining and processing, and then eventually, what do we do with the waste afterwards? But the thing is that I feel like nuclear energy, we have had, big problems. Like Chernobyl is a big incident that a lot of people like to point to like say that nuclear energy is unsafe. And I will grant that like yes, there's the potential that nuclear energy or like a nuclear power plant like melts down and damages an area. But like Griffin said, Chernobyl was a freak accident of like 30 different things going wrong all at once, and we have significantly improved the safety standards. The biggest problem with nuclear energy right now is actually negligence is pretty common. A lot of nuclear power plants that exist right now, like the administrations that are designed to go and check and regulate them to ensure that they're up to standards and like they're safe, are significantly underfunded, and so people are having to like do 18-hour work days to like go and measure all of these things because it's just one dude for like an entire plant. And so it that is part of the reason why it's so hard to ensure safety on those things. And there's a lot more. I don't remember all of the stuff that I did research on, but there are definitely risks to nuclear energy, but there's also an extremely high reward to it. So I think that ultimately nuclear energy isn't the final form of energy we should use, but I think that it's better. Like we said earlier with bioenergy, that it's like a good intermediary, but I think nuclear energy is a better intermediary because we have the ability, like it's going to last a pretty good amount of time, and it's going to produce so much energy all at once to replace our fossil fuels essentially. And I'm not going to say that we should do like the Fallout universe level of nuclear energy where you're like putting a nuclear reactor in your car, but I think that, having a couple plants to power that electricity market, I think it has potential.
Yeah, and you also think about in terms of intermediaries, if you turned all of the funding that goes into fossil fuel energy at this point to nuclear energy, I think not only could you ensure that it was very safe energy, but you could also figure out ways to make the mining more clean and ensure that it's less impactful. The waste is still something we have to deal with, but
There's not really any
honestly,
way you can get around that, and that is
yeah,
a genuine thing you have to consider because the waste can be like it can be super damaging in all sorts of ways.
it's also worth it though, because if we can ensure, you know, clean nuclear energy that is also, in a safe environment that we are getting it, we can power so much for so long. There's a limit on it, but one would hope that the limit is enough that it produces so much energy that it's difficult to imagine that nuclear energy, if we focused on it as our main source, could run out before we figured out something that was permanently renewable.
Yeah.
Or who knows, maybe we'll figure out a way to renew uh, uranium
We
and
use
figure out how to
fusion.
make that. Yeah, there's so much about it that we don't know that I think not only we know enough to harness the energy, and if we're doing that, maybe we can learn enough while we're doing that to better it, to make it better, and to make it maybe cleaner, and to figure out some way to just make it work. The other thing that, with waste, obviously, you have a time limit on how long we can use nuclear energy, just as long as there's uranium. But you figure if we isolate and flood the plants after we're done and keep all of our waste in there and just never use them again, like that would be a potential way to deal with that. Because
Yeah.
that is how they deal with spent fuel rods. Um,
Mhm.
Water is very effective at blocking radiation.
Yeah, there's a wonderful book called What If. It's by Randall Munro, and he talks about could you swim in a pool of spent nuclear rods? And the answer is yes, but only if you don't get shot by security on the way there. It's like for every foot of water, or not even foot, I think it's like for every inch or something, it cuts the amount of radiation in half. Like water is incredibly good at that. Um, the issue with that though is that if you have like irradiated water and it would break down the plant potentially and maybe leak into the environment around it. But I feel like we could manage it a little bit better. I will say one thing is that the waste is certainly an issue and definitely a big concern. So I understand why people are against nuclear energy on that ground. But I will also, my thought is that nuclear waste is like something that we can handle and contain, whereas like the waste from current fuel sources is not something we can contain and control like where it goes and what it does.
Yeah, clearly not anymore since we've reached this point. And
Yeah.
that's honestly what this is all about. There's a reason it's called alternative energy sources. It's because we're just looking for something to replace what's going on because we know that what we're doing is not at all sustainable. I think nuclear energy fills that niche pretty well.
All right. I think we have said way too much on this topic, so we can move on to the next energy source, hydrogen energy. Essentially, hydrogen energy is just it's still burning stuff, but it is burning hydrogen, which burns much cleaner. It doesn't release as many gases into the air that's going to uh, screw things up. The issue is that I feel like harvesting hydrogen's a little bit more difficult. We
Well,
could
yes and
all
no.
like
Electrolysis is certainly an option.
it is. I don't know the full like cost of a hydro that word. I don't know the full cost of like doing that on a wide scale to fuel all of our stuff, our full energy market demands. But I would say that, we have a lot of water. So if that was the way we did it, we did there's certainly ample stuff. And also, uh so in an ideal combustion reaction, the only pro- the only products released are carbon dioxide and water, I believe, correct?
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay. And
Well,
the
but
reason that
so uh that is in hydrocarbons. Um
hmm
because the goal here is just to burn hydrogen gas, the only product is water.
okay. If we want to recycle the hydrogen from the combustion, we wouldn't like that would be a case where we wouldn't be able to, you know, this isn't like Minecraft where you can't make like infinite farms of something. So we can't like burn the hydrogen and then split the water with the energy we produce to then burn more hydrogen because there's energy lost in these reactions.
But we
But
can do that slightly.
well, a little bit. But what I was going to say is we could recycle the physical resource of the hydrogen and the water. But that's where we put in like you just make a hydrolys less what's the word?
The word you're looking for is electrolysis.
Yeah, electrolysis. We could make like an electrolysis plant that was powered by wind or solar in that case, and then that adds in the a little bit of energy we need to just recycle it. So I think that hydrogen has a potential. I haven't done a whole lot of research on it, so I mean,
I think
I
the
don't know
main
how.
appeal of hydrogen is how clean and simple it is.
Yeah.
Producing just water, and you know, I think you make a wise comparison to Minecraft here. And this could just be the fact that I've played a lot of Minecraft. But when I hear about a hydrogen energy plant, my first thought goes to the fact that you can produce hydrogen gas from water, and burning hydrogen gas produces water. So my mind
hmm
immediately goes to, oh yes, we'll burn it, we'll capture the water that it gives off, and then we'll electrolyze that, and then burn the gas that comes off from that. In reality, that's not realistic again because it is, it will dwindle. You're gonna lose energy in these reactions. Uh, the thing you forget though is that there's an infinite supply of water. Even if you
There
don't
is a
use
lot of
the
water.
water that is produced by the hydrogen gas, if you have a hydroelectric plant that funnels water into an electrolysis, you can have water produce the energy to electrolyze itself and then have it be burned as hydrogen to produce more energy. Um,
Mhm.
Again, I don't know the math on that. I don't know if that's realistic. Uh, I don't exactly know how much energy you can expect from that, but it is just sort of interesting to think about because hydrogen energy is only utilizing, these very basic building blocks of life. It's very easy to think of a lot of ways that we could use it in tandem with other energy sources or as a sort of catalyst for other energy sources.
Yeah. The other thought that I have on hydrogen energy is that hydrogen gas is like it's matter that you can transport, whereas like so like when we're talking about wind and solar, like if you're not in those plants, either you'd have to make a really long cable to like transport the energy, you either or you'd have to put it into a battery and then transport it somewhere in the battery. But like hydrogen, you could build those plants anywhere and the gas itself could be transported. Now, of course, you know, the Hindenburg, I think is the name of the Zeppelin.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, Hindenburg problem, where all the hydrogen ignites and explodes and it's a whole disaster. You know, maybe we make something that's not that big, but like
No,
if we
no
had like
more dangerous than than natural gas, though, is the thing.
yeah, I was gonna say like if we made like canisters or like barrels of hydrogen, you could transport that a lot more effectively, and then instead of having to um you know you get the energy at wherever you build the plant, you can then transport it and build the plant wherever the energy is needed. Um, and so like the hydroelectric plant, like we said, it's limited to where there's rivers, but if that's where you're getting your hydrogen fuel from, you can then just load that up onto a truck and drive it to a city where it's got the hydrogen plant and then um, burn it there so that it's directly applicable.
Yeah. Um,
I think there's a lot of potential here. Uh,
I
I don't
agree.
know. I maybe we're being idealistic here, and we just don't know enough about the energy production of burning hydrogen. But I'm pretty optimistic about that.
Yeah. And so with that, let's move on to our second to last one, which is tidal energy. Tidal energy is fairly straightforward. It is effectively just hydroelectric energy that is powered by the rather than the flow of a river, the movement of the tides.
And there is a lot of energy there. I'm not sure what the impact of that's going to be in terms of like environmental, because my thought is that if you're going to be using, because my assumption here is that the tides that we're talking about are the like that scene in Finding Nemo where the turtles are all like chilling in the EAC or whatever.
Yeah. Those are
Yeah, like
the currents.
ah, I'm
This is
thinking
the
of like
tides. Yeah, you're thinking of currents. The
I'm thinking
currents
of currents. Okay.
also potentially harnessable, but that would be hydroelectric and just basic hydroelectric. Um,
Yeah.
Tidal energy is you have units basically lined up on the shore,
Mm-hmm.
and basically the tide washes water into the plant, and then it pulls it back out, and you harness the movement there. Again, you use that to either like turn a turbine or something like that. You use that energy to produce your electricity or whatever. I don't
Um.
think it's super applicable. Again, I think this is one of the niche things where it's sort of harnessing what's there and it's what's available to you. So again, like geothermal, it's very smart and it's very ingenuitive. I just don't know that it's universally applicable on the level that some of these other ones are.
Yeah, and that is kind of an important thing. The last one on the list is very similar. It is called wave energy, which I had never heard of before. But essentially, it's instead of using like the waves like on a beach, like the tide pulling things in there, it's you're having generators that are on the ocean's surface. And so as the water naturally goes up and down, that's going to pull water in and out of it, and that's going to turn the turbine. And
Mm-hmm.
because they're pretty similar products, I feel okay like grouping them together and talking about them together. I think that the two biggest concerns I have is one, I don't think that this is going to be a super high efficiency. Like it's not going to produce a whole lot of power, I don't think. It's going to be super reliable because, the movement of the movement of water in the ocean is pretty much guaranteed. as long as we have a moon. But
Yay us.
yeah, as long as nobody tries to steal it, or blow it up, we're good. Anyway, but the other thing is that like if you're gonna put like a big wave energy plant on the ocean to like float, that's also gonna have some sort of impact. It's got to be close to the shore, so it's gonna have some sort of impact on the wildlife that's gonna inhabit that area. Um, Maybe not, definitely not as much as hydroelectric or geothermal, but I would say it's gonna be pretty significant.
Yeah,
It
and
depends on where
and
you put it.
more long lasting as well. Um,
Hmm.
Again, geothermal is it's intrusive, but it is removable. This would be permanently altering to the that environment.
Or semi-permanently. Because the thing is, because like I don't know what a wave energy plant looks like, but my thought is sort of like you'd have to cordon off like a section of the ocean, to like have these wave generators, and then, um, do you know how a wave pool works at like a water park?
Yeah.
I feel like it'd just be the opposite of that.
Yes.
Like you, okay,
That is effectively what it is. Um, and I mean, almost literally, it is. It takes in the energy of the waves, and produces power instead of the other way around. Um,
hmm
and there's a little bit of finickiness to getting this implemented. Again, you have to find the right location. But also, it's just gonna get beat up.
yeah.
The ocean is pretty brutal. And if you're putting things even near the shore, if you're putting things in the ocean, don't expect it to go particularly well.
Don't expect it to last very long either, because salt water is very like water is the universal solvent and does a lot of damage to things over time, but like salt water is even worse.
Yeah,
So
very abrasive and corrosive. What is your favorite?
I think that
Doesn't have to be the most efficient or the one that you think would work the best. Just what's your favorite?
I think my favorite's gotta be hydrogen, honestly, because the thing is that realistically, think I think that nuclear is where we need to go uh next. But the thing is that hydrogen, I think, is a better overall fuel source. I think that the fact that it's so simple and has the potential to be so much more renewable and clean, definitely just makes it like my favorite potential.
I
Like
I can agree with that. I My preference here is going to be for nuclear. I just really I think it's very interesting, and I think it's really like sort of like a big benchmark of human achievement that we
hmm
are, we're harnessing the power of friggin' bonds to produce energy for life. I do agree. I honestly, as I learn more and more about it, hydrogen energy is very intriguing, and I would like to know more about it. But
yeah,
I also think that nuclear energy is where we need to go next. Um,
I agree with that. That's my personal take.
Also,
Which
it's a lot like stocks, where we want to have a diversified portfolio. You mentioned earlier having all of our eggs in one basket. Um,
yeah,
with uh, with bioenergy. I think we can run into a similar thing where we get a drought. Hydroelectric is gonna sort of fall off. Maybe we run out of uranium briefly. The miners go on strike. Something happens, like that. Maybe we don't have access to as much nuclear energy. So I think it's a good idea to branch out and just sort of feel out all of these new things. And I think that nuclear energy allows us to sort of have a dependable source of energy, that allows us to branch out and research these other things, um, pretty fear free.
once again, I'm just going to reiterate this. Neither of us are experts on this, and this isn't do your own research on these topics. Don't take our words for it because we're vastly underqualified for that. But we hope that this was interesting to you and that you will take a look and do, if you feel particularly passionate about any of these energy sources, maybe Maybe you go join that cause.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is all we have time for today. Thank you for listening to the ramblings of these two madmen. We'll have new episodes out roughly every week. Please leave a comment if there's something you'd like to hear us discuss, if you have any general commentary, or if we left out your favorite type of alternative energy. Um, we're not experts. We might have forgotten something crazy that we hadn't considered. Let us know. We'd be happy to hear.